Okay, let's get into it. You know that feeling, right? That little flicker of worry when you give out your email for the 10th time today. Or you see another headline, some company losing millions of customer records.
Yeah, it happens way too often.
It just feels like our private lives are, well, becoming very public very fast.
That's exactly it.
And that feeling, that whole question of control, that's what we're really diving headfirst into today.
Right. This is our deep dive into data privacy and security, specifically in, the digital age we're all living in.
Okay.
And our exploration today, it's drawing from a pretty comprehensive article. It looks at the history, the challenges we're facing right now, recent developments, say up to 2025, and where things might be headed, plus the legal side of it all.
So our mission here, together with you listening, is really to cut through all that complexity.
Yeah, it can seem daunting.
To really get why this whole ongoing debate about data privacy actually matters to you. We want to give you a clear path to understanding what's happening, why it's important, without, getting totally bogged down in jargon.
Exactly. It seems overwhelming, but grasping the basics, the main shifts and struggles, it's pretty essential for anyone online today.
Couldn't agree more. So maybe let's rewind a bit first.
Good idea.
How did we even end up here, where data privacy is such a hot topic? It wasn't always about algorithms and tracking online, was it?
Not at all. It's crucial to remember privacy concerns existed long before the internet. Think about physical files, right?
Like paper records.
Exactly. Medical records, financial details, things like that.
Yeah.
The main worry back then was physical security.
Right. Someone breaking in, stealing files.
Unauthorized access to paper trails, often locked away in offices.
Padlocks and filing cabinets. Yeah. Sounds almost quaint now compared to cyber threats.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the game totally changed with computers, then databases.
In the 70s, 80s.
Yeah, around then. As that tech took hold, we saw the first attempts at laws. Things like the U.S. Privacy Act in '74, the OECD privacy guidelines.
Foundational stuff.
Right. Early efforts to set rules for handling this new digital information.
Then came the internet explosion, 90s, early 2000s. That must have thrown a wrench in those early ideas.
Oh, absolutely. A huge wrench. The sheer ability to collect and share massive amounts of data online, it was a total paradigm shift.
Everything accelerated.
Massively. And that led to more comprehensive rules, like the EU's Data Protection Directive back in 1995.
Okay.
That recognized, individuals needed stronger rights over their digital footprint.
And it feels like maybe in the last 10 years or so, the urgency just cranked way up. Those huge data breaches hitting the headlines.
You're spot on. Events like the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Huge.
And the Equifax breach, they weren't just about lost data. They seriously damaged public trust.
Right. Trust in the big institutions holding all our information.
Exactly. And that created this huge public demand for more accountability, stronger rules.
Yeah.
That pressure led directly to things like GDPR in 2018.
The big one in Europe.
And the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, in 2020. It really marked a global shift towards tougher data protection.
So we went from paper files to these gigantic interconnected digital systems, a really rapid evolution. But why is it so critical right now? What's different today?
Well, several things have kind of converged. First, the power of big data and AI.
Artificial intelligence.
Right. Companies can now analyze these enormous data sets to understand us, even predict our behavior with incredible accuracy.
Which raises some big questions.
Profound questions, really, about manipulation, about concentrating too much power.
It's that slightly creepy feeling, isn't it, when algorithms seem to know what you want before you even do.
Exactly that feeling.
Yeah.
And secondly, there's the rise of what some people call surveillance capitalism.
Okay, what's that exactly?
Essentially, it describes a business model where tech giants hoover up vast amounts of your personal data.
Often, without you fully realizing it or giving really explicit consent for everything they do with it.
Right.
And they use it to create these incredibly detailed profiles for targeted ads and, other commercial purposes.
So for many of these free online services we all use, our data isn't just used, it's the actual currency. It's the asset being traded.
Precisely. That's the core of the model for many. And finally, you just can't ignore the sheer scale, the financial devastation of cybercrime.
Yeah, you mentioned a figure earlier.
By 2025, global cyber attacks are projected to cost over $10 trillion annually.
Wow. 10 trillion.
That number alone just underscores the massive, very real consequences when data security fails.
$10 trillion. That really hammers home the stakes, doesn't it? So with that as the backdrop, what are the main battlegrounds? Where's the conflict happening in this fight for data privacy?
There are several key areas, yeah. One huge challenge is corporate data exploitation.
Meaning companies just grabbing too much. Pretty much. Many companies collect so much data, often without being clear about what they're taking or how they'll use it. We've all seen those incredibly long privacy policies.
Oh, yeah. The ones you scroll through without reading.
Exactly. They seem designed to be legally airtight, but practically speaking, almost impossible for a normal person to understand fully.
Yeah, you just click accept.
And the consequences for getting it wrong, for mishandling data, they could be huge. The article mentions Meta, Facebook's parent company, getting hit with a $1.3 billion fine in 2023. That was for GDPR violations tied to how they move data between the U.S. and Europe.
$1.3 billion. That shows regulators have teeth sometimes.
Definitely. It signals serious financial penalties are possible.
And it's not just past mistakes, right? There are ongoing sites happening now.
Oh, yes. There are numerous lawsuits against Google, for instance, alleging they secretly collected data from Chrome users, even when people thought they were in incognito or private browsing mode.
Really? Even in incognito? That's the allegation in those suits. And it just highlights this constant tension, doesn't it, between what companies say they do with their data and what they actually do.
It really boils down to trust, I think. That feeling that you're trading your personal info for services.
Yeah.
But you don't really understand the deal, or you don't have a real way to opt out meaningfully.
Exactly. And that lack of transparency, that lack of real control, it just fuels distrust and makes people demand stronger privacy protections.
Okay, so that's the corporate side. Another major conflict you touched on is that inherent tension between, say, government surveillance and our basic rights to privacy. That feels like a constant tightrope walk.
It absolutely is. Governments will often argue quite strongly that surveillance is vital for national security.
Right. Preventing crime, terrorism.
Exactly. And you see examples like China's social credit system. It uses widespread surveillance for, social monitoring and control.
That system gets a lot of attention. Continuous tracking, scoring citizens.
Yeah.
It raises huge privacy red flags for many people outside China. Understandably so. It represents one, perhaps extreme, end of the spectrum.
So what about elsewhere, like in the U.S.?
Well, in the U.S., for example, you have the ongoing debate around things like the Patriot Act and similar surveillance laws. Privacy advocates argue that these broad measures can seriously erode fundamental civil liberties.
It's a complex balance.
It really is. The justification is often preventing harm, which is obviously important. But critics also rightly point to the potential for government overreach and the sort of chilling effect constant monitoring can have on free speech and assembly. There are no easy answers there.
No, definitely not. And then throwing another spanner in the works, there's the constant evolving threat of cyber attacks. It feels like almost every day there's news of another breach, another ransomware attack.
Unfortunately, yeah, that feeling is pretty close to reality. Cyber attacks aren't just more frequent, they're getting way more sophisticated.
How so?
Well, the article points out a pretty alarming stat. Ransomware attacks jumped by 150% just since 2020.
Wow, 150%, that's huge.
It's a dramatic increase, and it shows how profitable and effective these attacks have become for criminals. And what's more worrying now is the increasing use of AI by the attackers themselves.
So AI fighting AI, almost.
In a way, yes. Cybercriminals are using artificial intelligence to develop smarter malware, to find new ways around traditional security defenses. It's becoming much harder to keep up.
So we're not just up against human hackers anymore. AI is now a tool on their side, too.
Precisely. It's like a constant technological arms race in the digital world.
Okay, so we've looked at the history, the current big challenges. What about recent developments, say between 2023 and now 2025? What's been shifting?
Well, we've definitely seen a clear trend towards tighter regulations globally. A really big example is the EU's AI Act, which is expected around 2025.
Ah, yes. Heard about that.
That's going to put restrictions on things like facial recognition technology and demand much more transparency in how AI systems actually work. That's a huge step for handling the ethics of AI.
Seems necessary, especially as AI gets more powerful. What about in the U.S.? Any movement on the legal front?
The article mentions a proposal for a U.S. federal privacy law. The idea there is to create one single national standard for data privacy.
To replace the patchwork.
Exactly. to try and simplify the current situation where you have different state laws, like the CCPA in California, creating complexity.
That would probably make things clear, especially for businesses operating across state lines. Are the tech companies themselves doing anything or just reacting?
No, some major players are definitely making moves. Apple, for instance, brought in app tracking transparency back in 2021.
Right, the pop-up asking if you want to be tracked?
Yeah. That gave users more direct control over whether apps could track their activity across other companies' apps and websites. It was a pretty big shift towards user empowerment.
And it certainly shook up the digital advertising world.
It absolutely did. And then you have Google, which launched its Privacy Sandbox initiative in 2024. Their stated goal is to phase out third-party cookies.
The little trackers that follow you around the web.
Those are the ones.
Yeah.
It's another major change aimed at limiting that kind of cross-site tracking and supposedly offering more privacy-friendly ad methods.
So it seems like some of the big tech firms are maybe at least acknowledging these privacy concerns, even if regulation is pushing them too.
That seems like a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're also seeing these new, even more sophisticated threats pop up.
Like what?
Deepfake scams, using AI to create fake but incredibly realistic videos and audio.
Scary stuff.
Very. They're estimated to have cost businesses something like $2.5 billion in 2024 alone. That just shows how AI can be weaponized beyond just hawking systems.
$2.5 billion from deepfakes. Wow, that threat is evolving fast.
It really is. And looking even further ahead, there's this sort of looming long-term risk from quantum computing.
How does that fit in?
Well, the theory is that future quantum computers could become powerful enough to break the encryption methods we rely on right now to protect almost all sensitive data.
So potentially cracking everything open.
Potentially, yes. It's a future vulnerability, but one that security experts are already thinking hard about and trying to plan for requires entirely new approaches to encryption.
Okay, that sounds like a major challenge down the road. So looking into that crystal ball then, what might the future hold? Are there promising solutions emerging?
There are definitely some interesting directions. One is the growth of decentralized technologies.
Like blockchain, Web3.
Exactly. Those kinds of technologies have the potential to give individuals more direct control over their own data. Think about decentralized identity systems, for example.
Where you manage your own digital ID.
Right. Without needing to rely on a big company or government agency to hold it for you, it could fundamentally shift who controls the data.
Back towards the individual.
That's the hope for many proponents. We're also seeing more places adopt what are called zero-trust security models.
Zero trust. What's the principle?
Basically, it means never trust, always verify.
Yeah.
Instead of assuming someone or something inside your network is safe, it requires continuous authentication for any access.
So constant checking.
Constant checking. It's seen as a much more resilient approach in today's environment, where threats can come from anywhere, even inside.
Makes sense. What about the ethical side of things shaping the future?
Ethics are becoming much more central to the conversation, thankfully. There's a growing push for explainable AI, or XAI.
Making algorithms less of a black box.
Exactly. Making their decision-making processes transparent, which is crucial for spotting and fixing biases, preventing discrimination. And the principle of data minimization is gaining ground too.
Meaning?
Just collect less data. The idea that organizations should only gather and keep the absolute minimum data they need for a specific stated purpose. Don't hoard data just in case.
Collect less, protect what you have better. Seems logical. And what about us? What role does public awareness, individual action play in all this?
It's absolutely critical, hugely important. We're seeing things like privacy-focused apps, Signal, Proton Mail becoming more popular.
Yeah, people are actively seeking them out.
Right, which shows a rising consumer demand for more secure tools. And alongside that, the growing focus on digital literacy programs is vital. Teaching people, the basics of cybersecurity, how to spot phishing scams, how to manage privacy settings.
Empowering individuals with knowledge.
Precisely. There seems to be this growing realization among people about just how valuable their personal data is and the risks involved in sharing it carelessly.
Absolutely. And that growing awareness, that's a powerful force for change itself.
It really is. It drives demand for better practices and pushes regulators and companies to act.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a fair bit of ground. The history, the challenges now, recent changes, where things might go. What are the main things you hope someone listening takes away from all this?
Okay, 3 key things, I think. First, just recognizing that data privacy isn't a nice to have. It's really a fundamental right in our digital lives.
Foundational.
Second, there's a clear ongoing need for stronger rules, yes, but also more ethical, responsible behavior from tech companies to actually protect our information properly.
Regulation and ethics going hand in hand.
Exactly. And finally, your awareness, public engagement, it's absolutely crucial. It plays a huge role in shaping a safer, more privacy-respecting digital future for all of us.
Well said. And that really brings us back to that phrase you hear a lot, doesn't it? If you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
That old chestnut.
As we look ahead, is that just how it's going to be? Or are we maybe possibly on the verge of a real shift towards giving people genuine control, real empowerment over their own data? It's definitely something to chew on.
It really is. And maybe some questions for you listening to think about further, like how can you practically protect your data better without just unplugging from everything?
Yeah, the convenience trade-off.
And what are your own thoughts on that government surveillance versus privacy debate? Where do you draw the line for national security?
A tough one.
And maybe, how do you see AI really changing data privacy over the next, say, 10 years? These aren't simple questions, but they're worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Ultimately, it feels like staying informed, being aware, taking those proactive steps where you can, that's key. By understanding this evolving landscape, each of us can actually contribute to building a digital world that feels a bit more secure, a bit more private.
Well put.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.